I think we start late, so I will just give my time to Mr. Prince.
Good morning. I thank Chairman Xi and all of you. Thank you very much for welcoming me to Taiwan, and it's my pleasure to be here and share my personal experiences and the learning that we've had in Adecco, where we are a global company operating in some 50 odd countries around the world. I'm going to draw upon the insights that we're getting from our customers around the world on human resource capital management, and share those insights with you, and also share what I see as a board director of Adecco and a board director on 2 other companies, and meeting chairmen and chief executives around the world, what I see as their challenges. Share this with you and give you an insight and see if it's familiar territory to you, and see if you can take a learning from this and share your thoughts with me. So let's start. I will walk around. I have a pack of notes because I've got a lot of valuable information to share. I can't keep it all up here. So we're seeing a lot of change. Change is part of our lives. When I first started work, I was going to work for a company for 35 years, work up about 20 layers, and each layer I'd get perhaps a bit of carpet and then some arms to my chair, and if I served long enough, perhaps become a manager, and then eventually retire gracefully. But the world has changed, hasn't it? But throughout all my career, the one thing that's been very important to me, and I've learned, is people. And when I started, people were like, I guess, machines more. Everything was very homogeneous and standardized. But that's no longer the world today. My young son of 23 is networking all the time on his iPhone, his iPad, and he challenges me daily with his knowledge of the world. When I first started, the knowledge was just from newspapers and textbooks. Today he can interrogate at least 100 different sources in a day and get different views. So that's the sort of world that we're in. But at the same time, change for people, whereas work is important for our image and learning and development, at the same time with change, a lot of disruptions being caused, and we're seeing mass unemployment occur, particularly in Europe and America, the developed world. And this is going to be absolutely significant influences on the world economy going forward. Similarly, with the high growth areas in what they call the BRIC areas, Brazil, Russia, India, China, but of course that's too simple. In Asia, all the growth here, there's a talent shortage. So what I want to share with you is some of the drivers that we've drawn out at Adecco and I've seen that are influencing boards, and how that plays into HR strategy and the talent you need to have a sustainable business going forward. Thank you. Now, I've put this up as the board agenda. I wanted to share with you what discussions are going on in the board of directors. But first, a piece of very valuable information. Accenture, the research consultancy, calculates that intangible assets, and intangible assets are the value of assets on a company relating predominantly to people skills, not plant and machinery. Intangible assets of the Fortune 500 companies represented 20% in 1980, and today they represent 70% of the value of the Fortune 500 companies. 70%. From 1980 to now, there's been a doubling in the value of Fortune 500 companies related purely to people, intangible asset skills. That's know-how and intellectual property. To me, that's a dramatic change, and that's going to just increase significantly in the next few years. In the last 20 years, we've seen digitization, We've seen changes in logistics and inventory management, such as Walmart leading that. We've seen the global grid, and people's lifestyles change dramatically. So what are the drivers that I can see in the next period that we need to take account of through HR? The board of directors are discussing aspects such as this. Of course, there's a massive move here and in many parts of the world from an agrarian economy to manufacturing powerhouses. In the last 4 years, the number of brick companies, which I mentioned earlier, in the Fortune 500 has more than doubled. So there's a shift of wealth and power in the world. By the end of the decade, roughly 40% of the world population would have reached middle class status. It's 20% today. That is huge growth in demand on our resources, and the major resource that's going to demand is human capital, and there's not enough of it. There's not enough of it with the right skills in the right place at the right time. Cost prices and structures are changing. For example, in India, Tata introduced their nano car at $2,000 US. How does General Motors in the US and Nissan ever compete with that sort of cost structure? There's blowback. I came across a term called blowback. If you light an oven, it blows back at you. You've got to be careful. Well, the blowback, an example of that is GE has produced, General Electric, a cardiograph for the Indian market at just $1,500. They're going to manufacture that now and take it to the US market. What's that going to do to the large organisations that are selling cardiographs at 10 times that price? China is going to pass the USA in the next 2 years with the largest research and development workforce. Another key aspect we're having to take account of in boards and looking at our resources is in productivity. Did you know that during the 1970s in the US, 80% of their growth came from adding labour to the market, GDP growth? In 2020, to achieve growth in the US of just 2 to 3% a year, they're going to need 70% from increased productivity, 30% from labour. In Europe, they're going to have to achieve 100% from productivity. And in Japan, McKinsey calculate 150% from productivity. What a change that's going to make to the world. In the 21st century, we need more knowledge workers. We know that. In the USA, they calculate that 85% of new jobs in the last decade were for knowledge workers. But there's only 20% of the skills available to meet the demand going forward. So again, massive change occurring. And remember what I started with? The value of Fortune 500 companies is predominantly people, intellectual property and know-how. So what's shaping our lives has dramatically changed, and this is the influences that we need to take account of at boards to be able to sustain growth in our companies, employment for people, and employment for governments and the whole society. So how does this impact the HR community? We need all of you to help the board be ready for these changes. No longer can the board of directors say, here's our strategy, and then a month later turn round to you and say, we need 1,000 people with these skills. It's too late. It's going to take months and months to do it. HR needs to be there at the board level, thinking through these dramatic changes and helping create the talent for the future. So let's look at the HR challenges. What trends are we seeing? And are these on your agenda? We've moved from a traditional top-down hierarchy I mentioned at the beginning to a much flatter matrix structure. 1 minute someone can be a team leader, the next minute they could be a specialist in another team. It's no longer are you just the supervisor or the manager or the director. The world changes too fast. Globalization means that companies are working 24/7. Ernst & Young, I'm on the audit committee of Adecco, Ernst & Young laid out their audit plan to us recently. And they laid out their costs. They've come down slightly, which is good news. But do you know why? because 40% of their audit work of a deco based in Switzerland or worldwide, 40% of their audit work is being outsourced to Ernst & Young in India. And that's substantially reducing costs. So the number of accountants they need in India has gone up, and the number of accountants they need in Switzerland is going down. There's a dramatic shift. That wasn't there last year.